So if you follow me on Twitter, you know I refer to myself as Conrad the Mortgage Guy, and I actually used to program myself in my phone going back 10 years. So whenever I would share my contact information with someone, I was easy to find in their phone. It's easy to meet a person and then you sort of remember meeting them, but you don't correlate their name and what they do with their face. Does that make sense? So I just program myself in there as Conrad the Mortgage Guy. And now that's what I call myself on Twitter. I believe in being easy to do business with, but don't take my word for it. Ask Steven up in Hobart, Indiana. He says, I had a great experience. Working with Derek was a breeze. He was always thorough and kept me in the loop to make sure I understood everything. It was very fast and helped me get a great rate. A big thank you to Derek and his entire team. Now, thank you, Steven, for the 5-star review. The 5-star reviews are piling up, man. If you want to save money, if you want to make this as painless and hassle-free as possible, you just got to try savewithconrad.com. That really is what my family wants to do, because Derek is my cousin, by the way. Let my family save your family some cash. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket, but we will save you money. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of how much. It's savewithconrad.com. NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. Hurry to savewithconrad.com. I love talking about our friend Steven Singer. I'll tell you, the competition must really hate this guy. He just makes the experience of buying a diamond better and better, and he makes it fun. Steven is the very first to offer each and every customer the perfect price. That's right. Have you ever wondered if you're getting the best price? Are you uncomfortable negotiating? Head to Steven Singer Jewelers and you're guaranteed to get the perfect price. You'll never pay more than the guy sitting next to you. And here's a little insider tip. Most jewelers mark their merchandise way up just to mark it down to make you feel like you're getting a deal. The guy next to you may be paying less. Do you want the most important purchase of your life to be based on your negotiating skills? Not the case at Steven Singer. Because at Steven Singer Jewelers, you're guaranteed to get the perfect price all day, every day, 365 days a year. That's why we trust Steven Singer. He makes the experience of buying a diamond so easy. So check out Steven Singer Jewelers at the other corner of 8th and Walnut in Philly or online at IHateStevenSinger.com. Steven Singer Jewelers, one place, one price.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Pritchard. Well, you know.
That's not a rib. She pooted.
She pooted.
What a rib?
No, yeah, but
there's no box of gimmicks.
Rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there.
Say something about
I don't give a shit. I ain't scared.
I ain't scared of shit.
Fuck him.
You, Bruce.
I love you take the cheese. Double cheeseburger. You take the bread. Double cheese. Well, you know. And then double mayo. You know, it's called chicken salad. Double onion, motherfucker. You're nothing but an egg-sucking dog.
Throw it in your Google machine.
Goddamn, kid. God damn it. What the hell show you got there? I need more. Ooh, yeah.
What say you?
Pronouns, pal.
And now, something to wrestle with. Con Bruce Pritchard.
The second most recognizable athlete in the entire world today.
Conrad Thompson.
What happened when? What would Vince say about that?
Well, hey Vince, to the my shorts look good tonight. Yeah. They're so big. Yeah. Let's go.
Bullshit.
Welcome to Wrestle. Man.
Roll tide on that.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With.
Something to wrestle with.
Something to wrestle with. Bruce Pritchard.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle With. Out, Bruce Pritchard. It's another remix episode. That's the bad news. But the good news is Bruce and I are set to record all new content tomorrow. So stay tuned. We are going to be dropping a new episode of Something to Wrestle. That's right. We found him, and you'll get a never before heard Something to Wrestle fresh off the presses tomorrow right here. Just check your main feed. Of course, you're going to get all these shows early and ad-free over at adfreeshows.com. But without further ado, we thought what better way to celebrate Kane going into the WWE Hall of Fame than to do a remix of Kane's debut. I think most everyone listening to this knows that the story of Kane is probably Bruce Pritchard's absolute favorite storyline in WWE history. We all sort of agree that the best angle maybe the company ever did was the main event from 1988, where we had the twin heel referee. I don't think a lot of people knew that Earl Hebner and Dave Hebner were identical twins, but we found out that day, and one of the best storylines ever. But this storyline is actually the one that has the most blood, sweat, and tears from Bruce Pritchard. So much so that he actually named his own son Kane and spells it the same way. And really think about this. Of all the storylines over all the 30 some odd years that Bruce has been involved in the wrestling business, this is the one he's most proud of. And we're most proud that our great friend, Mr. Glenn Jacobs, is finally taking his rightful place in the WWE Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Kane, AKA the mayor of Knox County. And this is my way of paying a little bit of tribute to his incredible career that started way back in October of 1997. Let's get to it. Without further ado, it's the remix of episode 68, In Your House, Bad Blood, from 1997. Do you own or rent your home? Sure you do, and I bet it can be hard work. But you know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or renters insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
All right, Bruce, it's time for What Happened When? The World Wrestling Federation presents In Your House, Bad Blood. The 20-year anniversary is upon us. I can't believe that's actually real, but it went down on October 5th, 1997. And of course, it was at the Kiel Center in St. Louis. We're going to break it down in long form today. Let's go ahead and tell you first, it drew a sellout, 21,151 fans, 17,404 of those paid $212,000, over $101,000 in merchandise. And it's the second largest crowd in the history of St. Louis, only behind Strangler Lewis. He had a stadium match against Jim Londos in 1934 that drew allegedly 35,000 folks. And this is kind of a weird time in the business because we've just kind of covered how September is historically a down month. The month prior, they don't even draw 6,000 folks with this same main event, Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker on top in Louisville for In Your House Ground Zero. And somewhere around here, even though we're doing a sellout and the second biggest crowd in St. Louis history and hundreds of thousands of dollars at the gate, we're telling Brett that we can't afford the current contract. The business is kind of in a state of flux for the World Wrestling Federation right now at this point, right, Bruce?
There were a lot of unknowns. There were a lot of unknowns at WCW and our business itself because things were changing. And I think that people will point back to this pay-per-view for once we explain it to everybody, this is a pivotal point in the wrestling business. And this is where the winds of change were in the air. And this is where so much change started to take place for not only the WWF, but also WCW. And, you know, people often get the whole Brett contract thing misconstrued. It wasn't, hey, Brett, you know, we want you gone. It was, hey, we need to redo your contract for less money. We still want you. However, if you want to go get the money at WCW and they're really offering you that amount of money, we're not going to hold you back. Go get it. But we need to restructure your contract here and make it a little less.
Of course, in hindsight, I think everybody realizes that the wrestling business is on an uptick here in October of 97, and it's about to get to a fevered pitch. But when you look at September 96 versus 97, it's kind of interesting because In Your House Mind Games, which is September of 96 in Philadelphia with Shawn Michaels and Mankind on top, it didn't sell out, but it drew 15,000 folks for a gate of 210,000. Well, as we just mentioned, the month prior to Bad Blood here at Ground Zero, they only draw 4,963 paid folks for a gate of 82,000. So it's a fraction of what it was the prior September. And this is an interesting time in storyline as well. We should catch you up here that in August at SummerSlam, Bret Hart became the second man to capture the World Wrestling Federation title 5 times, the first being Hulk Hogan.
All right, let's run a timeout right now and talk about Bret Hart becoming a world champion again. Of course, it happened a couple months prior to this. SummerSlam 97, he wins the world title for the 5th time, and he's only the second guy in history to do it. behind Hogan. Really think about that and how different the world looks, 20 some odd years later. Randy Orton's a 14-time champion. John Cena's a 16-time champion, on and on and on. But in this era, title reigns, I don't know, they just meant more, right? It felt like they weren't playing hot potato. We didn't have a new champion every week. I think that probably became more of a thing during the Attitude Era, but it doesn't feel like it ever really slowed down. And I was looking at a graphic the other day that showed all the folks who had been Universal Champion, and it's still so much more frequent than it used to be. But this is rarefied air. And, we've talked a lot here on Something to Wrestle about when Bret became the champion. People wondered within the company, how do we promote him? And Bruce has often said that the saying around the office was, what would we do for Hogan? Hogan was special, man. Hogan was the centerpiece of the WWF's explosion, and he became a pop culture icon. So to be in that rarefied air for Bret, man, that's pretty special. And it is sort of interesting to look back in hindsight and think about how the title once meant so much. And I'm not saying it doesn't mean as much now, but it does feel less special. When Hogan had 5 runs and Bret had 5 runs, but Randy Orton had 14 and John Cena had 16. And again, not disparaging those guys, just trying to add a little context. Let's keep it going. It's episode 68, the Bad Blood Remix. It can be a little frustrating, especially if you're in a hurry or running late, to find yourself at a railway crossing waiting for a train. And if the signals are going and the train's not even there yet, you may feel a bit tempted to try and sneak across the tracks. Well, don't. Ever. To the naked eye, trains often appear to be further away and moving slower than they are, and they can't stop quickly. And even if the engineer hits the emergency brakes right away, it can take a train over a mile to stop. Over a mile to stop. By that time, it's too late, and the result is a potential deadly crash. The point is, you can't know how quickly the train will arrive. The train can't stop quickly, and even if it sees you, it ends in disaster. If the signals are on, the train is on its way, and you just need to remember one thing. Stop. Trains can't. Paid for by NHTSA.
In the main event there, he's taking on The Undertaker with Shawn Michaels as the special guest referee. Shawn and Bret have an issue. Shawn accidentally clocks The Undertaker with a chair. He was intending that chair shot to go for Bret Hart, and this allows The Undertaker to drop the title, crowning Bret for the 5th time. So we've got a hot issue here with these 3 guys, because now Shawn has cost The Undertaker the world title, and Bret is going to be off to working with the Patriot. He's going to be in a match with the Patriot here as well. But I find it interesting that Bret is, getting this news about the contract and maybe some changes that need to be made there. But he's also the world champion, and he's not headlining consecutive pay-per-views here. He faced the Patriot at In Your House Grand Zero, and he was second from the top. He's positioned below The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, who don't have a title on the line. And then he'll be here on this pay-per-view, working as the world champion, although not in a title match. But again, below Shawn and The Undertaker. How much of that was strategy based on, we think we may have to let Bret go? And how much of that was just political gamesmanship behind the scenes? How was Bret with being the world champion, but not in the main event?
Well, it was storyline. It wasn't political gamesmanship. It was storyline. We wanted to position Shawn Michaels as a heel to have something that people could really sink their teeth into. And by Shawn closing the shows and giving Shawn to crow about, I'm the main event, I'm the showstopper, I'm the guy that they always have to count on. And putting him in that spot, it gives Bret something to talk about and gives Shawn something to talk about as well. That's simply storyline. That was character for Shawn and for his character, because Shawn coming back as a babyface. Shawn was a babyface prior to that Bret and Undertaker match. He was more babyface than he was heel. And we wanted Shawn to be that heel. So this was a way to give him a little bit more teeth in his bite. And by doing that, people are going, well, wait a minute, God, maybe he's right. And it gives Bret something as a heel to bitch about. And it was storyline driven to be able to put him in that position. And in addition, in St. Louis alone, that cage attraction, the Hell in a Cell, as we were told many times, this is not a cage match. This is Hell in a Cell. The attraction itself was the main event.
We'll talk about the Hell in a Cell creation, I'm sure, here in a little bit. Let's talk about where we are with Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's really started to come into his own and become one of the hottest stars in the business. Even during this pay-per-view, you see a commercial for his t-shirt. In hindsight, that's kind of fun to see, isn't it, Bruce? A commercial for a single t-shirt inside a pay-per-view.
Hell yeah, because it was the single best-selling t-shirt we had ever had. It was absolutely, on fire is a metaphor we use. No, this thing was burning everything up, the Austin 316 shirt, and Steve was red hot. So it was a way to keep Steve out in the forefront without having Steve have to go out and wrestle a match. He was the hottest thing in the business.
Let's mention why he's not able to go out and wrestle the match. At SummerSlam, of course, he wrestled Owen Hart. As many of you recall, there was a tombstone pile driver where instead of Owen going to his knees, he kind of dropped down to his bottom, and that left Austin's head exposed. So he suffered what was believed to be a stinger, but then it turned out it was more significant than that. The Wrestling Observer would report, after his exam by noted Philadelphia neck specialist Dr. Joseph Torg, the current prognosis on Steve Austin is that he'll be out of action for a minimum of 2 months. Austin aggravated an already injured neck when his head was too low, and Owen Hart gave him a tombstone pile driver at SummerSlam in the match where Austin was given the Intercontinental title. Among other injuries, Austin, 32, suffered a bruise of the spine, along with his fairly significant neck problems that were a combination of both the recent jar and the cumulative effect of the wear and tear of his wrestling career. The injury has resulted in continual tingling in his shoulders, similar to if one sleeps wrong on their shoulders and wakes up with their limb asleep. The feeling was that Austin would eventually be able to wrestle, though the first doctor he saw in Texas recommended he retire and warned him that suffering another serious injury of the type would put him at risk of paralysis. Due to that, he'll likely have to modify his style in the ring and not take certain bumps that could potentially aggravate the injury. The basic prognosis is that after laying off and doing rehab for the next 2 months, he'd be re-examined, and at that time, he'd have a better idea as to when he could return to the ring. So according to the Observer here, you guys had no idea when he'd be able to come back. You just knew you wouldn't know anything for 2 months. Is that the way you remember it?
Exactly. So we wanted to keep Steve relevant on television. If he was able to come back, then we would be able to bring him back into a physical role. If he wasn't able to come back in a physical role, we would have him involved some way, somehow doing something else, whether it was an authority figure, a commentator, something else.
And in the meantime, you guys try to keep busy with his angles. And Austin is now, of course, feuding with Owen Hart, who's strutting around wearing an Owen 316 t-shirt. Whose idea was the Owen 316 t-shirt?
I think it was Owen's, actually. There was an old t-shirt. Greg Valentine used to wear a shirt. It was, "I broke Wahoo's leg." And that was all the t-shirt said. This was back in the 70s or 80s, probably 70s, in the Mid-Atlantic territory. And I always remembered that because that was, to me, such a cool shirt. It was a heel shirt, and he's walking around with a shirt, "I broke Wahoo's leg." So I was thinking, what if Owen had a shirt that said, "I broke Steve Austin's neck"?
Right.
And we did that on the back, but on the front, we did the Owen 316 just as kind of a takeoff on the Austin 316, thinking that heel fans or people may gravitate to that because of the Austin 316. And I think it was Owen that may have had that idea. It was either Owen or Vince, but it came from the idea of wanting to put the "I broke Austin's neck" on a shirt like Greg Valentine, "I broke Wahoo's leg."
The "I broke Wahoo's leg" is actually a shirt that Tony Schiavone has in his t-shirt store at ProWrestlingTees.com /WHW. But if we're going to talk about t-shirts and the popularity of Austin 316, we should talk about the hottest selling shirt over at ProWrestlingTees.com. And that is the Houston Relief shirt. If you'd like to see it, it's at brucepritchard.com. And 100% of the proceeds of that shirt go directly to the relief effort after the hurricane there in Houston. Right, Bruce?
All that money goes to the Houston Food Bank, who are still feeding people that are homeless and that need some food. They're still feeding workers and everybody that's trying to clean up. You wouldn't believe the cleanup that is still needed here in the Houston area. And all those proceeds go to that effort. And you get that over at brucepritchard.com. And you also get my favorite of all time, the I Used to Be Over shirt, second most recognizable athlete in the world shirt, if that is what you do. And if you don't have a job, then I've got the perfect shirt for you. No job. Box of gimmicks, everything over at brucepritchard.com. And when you buy a shirt, I'm eventually going to call you just to say thank you. And it's been so cool calling people who bought the Houston Relief shirt and being able to talk to folks. It is amazing the number of people that bought that are from Texas.
Really?
And it's also amazing the number of people. It's blowing me away as well outside of Texas that just wanted to help and lend some support. And I thought that's been cool as hell.
Well, and we think it's cool when you support the show. It's the cheapest, easiest, fastest way to show your love for the show out in public, if you will. So pick up a shirt over at brucepritchard.com. Bruce, do you reckon that we could get Jim Cornette to sport a George the Rat t-shirt?
God damn, I love George, you motherfucker, you. Don't make fun of George, my baby. I had to console my baby for days after George died. His little frozen body in the freezer.
My goodness.
Next to the macaroni and cheese, Stouffer's macaroni and cheese. It's easy. You put it in the oven, heat it up. It's bubbly and cheesy. I put extra cheese on it.
So,
motherfucker.
Thank you. If you haven't noticed, the Jim Cornette impression isn't complete until I start to move on, and then Jim cuts me off with an MF-er. Right, Bruce?
Motherfucker.
There you go. So since Austin can't wrestle, he's advancing the storyline by confronting those who want to protect him from himself. And along the way, they decide, even though he can't wrestle, he could still give some stunners. So he gives a stunner to the play-by-play guy, it's easy for me to say, play-by-play guy, good old JR himself. Then he stuns the color guy, Jerry Lawler. He works his way up to Sergeant Slaughter, who on camera is the commissioner of the World Wrestling Federation. But then the big one goes down in Madison Square Garden. Was the idea to always, when you started this, he's stunning different personalities and authority figures, was the idea always to end with Vince in Madison Square Garden, or how does that idea come about?
No, it kind of built to Vince just organically. And once we got into it and there were the sideways looks from Steve to Vince, Vince viewed himself as a commentator. Vince didn't view himself that people knew that he was the owner of the damn company. So Vince saw himself as the commentator and people didn't care about him and so on and so forth. And as I said, winds of change. And people were starting to boo Vince when he came out, and the stuff with Brett and stuff with Steve. And Steve did it on purpose, man. He would give Vince that sideways glance. Then we knew, oh, hey, let's have him finally cross the line, because no one had really put their hands on Vince. Brett had pulled his shirt over. They had a little brawl there, but no one had really done anything to Vince ever. Garden, they knew Vince in the Garden. Let's do it in New York and let's stun Vince, and that will be a good exclamation point.
Do you think that when Austin was looking at Vince sideways out there, that he had any idea that would wind up where it was, or was it him just trying to mean mug everybody on camera?
I think it's Steve just, making everything as much as he could out of everything that he did. And it's no different than the time that Steve gave the sideways look to Sable and everybody went, oh, there's something there. It just kind of happened, but Vince had that heel about him that it was easy to come out.
Was there ever any sort of conversation about what if Steve can't come back amongst your conversations with Steve or with the office? I mean, if you guys are sitting around, talking about what you might do for Survivor Series and what the Royal Rumble might look like and what WrestleMania looked like, was there ever any real consideration that, hey, he might not be able to come back from this?
Sure. Yeah, there definitely was. And that's what I talked about in the very beginning. The unknown at this time made the business very exciting, because from one day to the next, things were changing. Guys were getting hurt left and right. This show itself, man, there was just so many injuries, and it appeared that every day there was something new, some new challenge that we had in front of us that we had to overcome. So you had to think, you had to wonder, what if he doesn't come back? If he doesn't come back, do we continue on? Is it Undertaker that we light the fire under and say he's our guy? Is it Shawn? Is it Triple H? What do we do? Thank God Steve came back and we never had to get there. There's always the hope. I think Vince is the eternal optimist, and Vince will look at things as, have a plan B, but I'm going with plan A.
Well, let's talk about the other kind of unfinished business with Steve Austin that kind of gets swept under the rug, I feel like. Austin goes into SummerSlam as a tag team champion with Dude Love. And the plan originally was to have Austin and Dude Love drop those belts to Owen Hart and Davey Boy the day after SummerSlam. Of course, because of Austin's injury, that can't happen. So instead, the month prior to Bad Blood at the Ground Zero pay-per-view, they do a fatal four-way, which is a four corners tag team match. And the Headbangers wind up winning the belts when Austin interfered in the match that was down to Owen and Bulldog. So there's just a lot going on here. How was the decision made for the Headbangers to become the tag champs at Ground Zero? I got to admit, even looking back at this, it kind of caught me by surprise that they were put in this position, because prior to this, the Headbangers had kind of been positioned as, I don't know, an enhancement tag team of sorts.
To do something different. And there was no longer the issue with Dude Love and Steve with Bulldog and Owen. So without that issue for Bulldog and Owen as tag team champions to have those guys to work with, we needed to go in a new direction. And we decided to go in the direction with Owen as Intercontinental Champion and kind of move Bulldog away from that. Headbangers just got the nod. You yourself just said, I never would have thought that. So
right.
It was to shock people and think that anything can happen in the WWF.
Chat me up about the decision for Austin to be as active as he was here. I think somewhere along the way, either Steve or Vince has commented that they feel like him just being forced to be on camera but do promo time as opposed to just traditional matches may have actually, in hindsight, helped his character development quite a bit and helped get him over even more. Would you agree with that?
Okay, time out. Let's talk about what if here for a moment. I think you could make the argument that one of the best things that ever happened for Steve Austin's career was his injury. I recognize how silly that sounds, and I'm sure somewhere Steve Austin is blocking me for a second time for even suggesting that. But hear me out. Had Austin not been injured, would they have tried to go as hard as they did with his character development? If you recall, once Austin could no longer compete in the ring, they started to do a series of in-ring bits. Things like stunning Sergeant Slaughter or stunning Vince McMahon in Madison Square Garden and being arrested. I think that did so much for his character development that it shouldn't be dismissed. I don't know if those opportunities would have existed had they been able to just put him into a regular match. So in a weird way, I think it worked out the way it was supposed to. Now, of course, I'm not talking about how this injury cut his career short. I certainly wish he never had to have neck fusion or still didn't have some after effects from that injury today. But would he have become the king of the mountain as fast as he did, as big as he did? I mean, there was no denying Steve Austin was the top star in the company when he's out there giving a stunner to Vince McMahon. And I'm not sold on the fact that the company definitely would have still done that had he not been injured. So it is one of those fun things to think about What if? Don't get me wrong, I'm not debating that he was going to be the top guy. He was destined for that. But I don't know that it would have happened with the force and the impact that it did had he not had all that extra promo time. You got to think there'd be less time talking, more time wrestling. But that talking, and that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so, and all the beer stuff and the stunning, all of that gaga, as Pat Patterson would like to say, really added to the allure of Steve Austin. At least from my point of view, my fandom was at an all-time high for Steve Austin because of his character stuff. And I just don't know that it would have mattered as much if he had a match with Dale Wilkes. Back to the remix here, episode 68, Bad Blood.
Wholeheartedly, I think that Steve's whole presence, I mean, just anywhere going out, and when you watch this pay-per-view and you see Steve go out during the Owen Farouk match, everything that he did, he made it mean something. He got involved in everything. Steve just couldn't just go out and cut a promo. Steve would have to go out and mess with people. And the way that Steve would cut his promo was unique, and people identified with him. He was every man, and he did the things that everybody else wanted to do or wished that they could do. So that character in and of itself lended itself to having him go down and take the hammer and ring the bell to start the match, to go over to the Spanish announce table and speak a little Spanish, and then go to the French table and mess with everybody that he touched. That's Steve Austin. That's the real guy. That's what he does in real life. So it was a way to get that personality on camera, and that was what people fell in love with.
You know, I admit that I'm not any sort of spine expert, obviously, being the mortgage guy. But it feels like if he's got some sort of spine trouble, him falling on his ass every night, giving a stunner, is probably not the best thing for him. I know it's not going the other direction, but Hulk Hogan would attribute that leg drop night after night to being the cause of a lot of his back trouble. Looking back, do you think it was smart for Austin to be running around stunning everybody during this time if he really had a significant back injury?
Well, it was his decision to do, and I think that in the end, it worked out all right. But you're right, as far as taking that bump on your ass, the compression on your spine, just your whole back is going to jar it. I wouldn't want to do it, but then again, I wouldn't deliver the leg drop every single night as a finish either. Everybody thought, hey, what an easy finish that is. It's just a bump, but it was an ass bump that I think his hips, both of his new hips, I think that had a lot to do with it.
Let's talk about some other things going on in the company. The September 8th Observer reported that Mark Henry was headed to Calgary to train under Bret Hart. And Meltzer would kind of freestyle that this is the WWF's last prayer to see if they could get anything out of their guaranteed contract they gave Henry before the Olympics. How close did the company get to writing off Mark Henry before he really started to get it?
I think Mark Henry's had a lot of last chances, and Mark has been able to come out of every one of them smelling like a rose and has improved along the way. I look at Mark Henry and I look at the last 10 years of his career, and I think that the investment and the time that was taken into Mark Henry turned out a pretty damn good talent. So Mark was somebody that had the heart and the desire and the personality. He really did want to succeed. Mark could be lazy sometimes, and that was Vince's way of trying to get Mark off of his ass. That's how you motivated Mark. And he went up to work in the dungeon with Stu and everybody up there and get away from what he was, get away from Mark's normal and get him into a different environment. And hopefully that would get him off his ass and teach him something else, and knew that Stu would love that big, strong man. Yeah, you like it, Luther Lindsay. Yeah, you big bastard. Stu would love that.
In August, Shawn and Triple H teamed up for the first time on Raw to take on The Undertaker and Mankind. Of course, this is the seeds of the formation of D-Generation X. That would actually become a thing the next month. Speaking of the next month, sometime in September, when you guys did the shot at Madison Square Garden, where we know famously Cactus Jack comes back, Stone Cold Steve Austin delivers that famous stunner to Vince McMahon. The triangle dark match was Brett versus Michaels versus The Undertaker. Do you think that could have been a pay-per-view, or did that dynamic for the house shows not really work?
Yeah, it definitely could have been a pay-per-view, but it wasn't, that wasn't the attraction at the time. But yes, it could have been a pay-per-view. It was a great match too, that I remember.
It's just fun to look back at that and you think, man, what could have been? I mean, that could have been, I don't think we ever saw that. That would have been
okay. You want to talk about what's fun to look back and say what could have been? I want you to think about this, and this is the first time that I've postulated, whatever the hell that term is, that I've said this. Think about what if Bret Hart had said, you know what, Vince, I'll take a reduction in my contract. I want to stay here.
Mm-hmm.
Bret Hart, I believe, had he done that and stayed, and that he would be the Shawn Michaels of the WWF. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, you're talking about, the older statesman, the guy people revere. And I think Brett still is that to some degree.
I do too.
But what you're saying is he would have been here for the really hot times and not just sort of the transition down times. And I feel like the hardcore Bret Hart fans feel the same way, that when he went to WCW, they really had no idea what they were doing with him. So some of the really ridiculously hot years, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, Bret's not anywhere in the conversation. And he would have been at the forefront of those had he been able to work things out here.
Right. And I look at one of the reasons that Vince reveres Shawn so much is going back to that day in Montreal. Shawn did what a lot of people may not have done. If Bret had stayed, it would have eliminated the need to have done that, and he would have shown confidence in Vince, and I think Vince would have rewarded him 10 times over in the years to come. It's just interesting to think about, what if Bret had stayed, and what if he hadn't left? And I really wish that he would have, because he's Bret, and I know what his legacy meant to him.
I think everybody wishes that would have been the case, hindsight being what it is. Kind of an interesting note here from Meltzer in the September 8th Observer. He wrote, the idea of having Michaels, Rude, and Helmsley as the new clique is already out the window, although they may put Michaels in with Helmsley as they are trying to find a way to elevate Helmsley to the next level. So Dave believed that DX as a group was sort of finished before they really got going. Was there hesitation internally about trying to position Helmsley with Shawn Michaels? Obviously they were friends behind the scenes in real life, but did Vince, who was sort of super protective of Shawn Michaels, feel like Hunter was pulling him down at that point?
Never.
Okay.
And they had chemistry backstage, and they had chemistry in front of the camera, and you could feel it. I think Shawn elevated Hunter big time. I don't think that Hunter brought Shawn down even a little bit. I think that Hunter rose to the occasion, and it was instant heat, and there was never a thought of, this isn't working.
As a reminder, Ground Zero took place on September 7th. It's kind of interesting that the WWE's pay-per-view that they called Ground Zero happened in September, but obviously this is years before. The main event was Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker there. It goes to a no contest, which of course sets up the main event here and puts it inside Hell in a Cell. But the next night on Raw is when Sergeant Slaughter opens the show and strips Steve Austin of the Intercontinental title and announces that there's going to be a tournament to crown a new Intercontinental champion. This, of course, earns Sergeant Slaughter a stunner. How did the idea come about to have Slaughter doing a commissioner gimmick and stripping Austin, he sort of inadvertently makes himself a heel commissioner, right?
Well, the idea wasn't to make him a heel commissioner. He just was the logical person as the commissioner to go out and make that announcement. And Steve, not being a traditional babyface, he hated everybody, and even his partners he would stun and attack. So that, yeah, we wanted Sarge to be that babyface commissioner, which is the reason to have Steve go out and stun him. It got Steve over that much more.
As a reminder, Lawler would later on another show interview Austin about the restraining order that Owen Hart had put on him. You know how that ends. Austin gives a stunner to Lawler. This taping, though, is sort of interesting. This one goes down on September 9th. Neither Vince McMahon or The Undertaker are here at this taping, which is kind of uncharacteristic at the time, to say the least. Right, Bruce?
Yeah, Vince rarely misses a television taping.
The reason I'm going to mention this is because a lot of us remember this as being the moment when Shawn comes out wearing tight biker shorts, and he's stuffed his shorts to make his crotch very pronounced on television. And for whatever reason, decides to start jumping up and down in Jim Ross's face as he is doing an in-ring interview and crotch chopping him, and really drawing a lot of attention to the fact that he has stuffed his shorts. He swears during the interview, and he's even calling out The Undertaker, who's on tape on the Titantron. So a lot of this has to be edited off because it is a tape show. And if you didn't know about this, you might not really piece it together, but there's some stuff they just couldn't keep from you. I believe, according to the rumor and innuendo, that he's even on microphone here, insulting The Undertaker, calling him a big chicken shit, begging him to come out, calling him other names. And of course, remember, The Undertaker's not even there. So he's burying The Undertaker to the live crowd. Were you there that night? What was happening backstage? What was the fallout for this behavior from Shawn Michaels?
I was there. I was sitting at gorilla position and watching the whole thing, livid. I was pissed because it wasn't what we had gone over with Shawn, and he had stuffed the towel down his pants right before he went out and got in JR's face. And I think it was in a lot of ways, it was a slap in the face to me and JR, because we were the ones that were running that taping. And it was, slap in the face to Vince not being there as well. Vince was not happy about it. I know Kevin Dunn was not happy about it. None of us were happy about it because it didn't follow what we had asked him to do, and the promo that we had asked him to go out and make to get to the next pay-per-view. I'll tell you the repercussions on the backside. Vince fined him heavily, but then Vince takes a turn, and this is where the whole attitude slogan era, everything came out, because Vince gets JR and I in a room and starts, pointing at Shawn and saying, what he's doing, it's showing attitude. We need more attitude. That's attitude, pal. And everybody on the roster needs to find some attitude. And attitude became the catchphrase for the next few years off of that one promo.
Really?
Really.
So the whole attitude movement began with Shawn going into business for himself and crotch chopping his stuffed shorts in JR's face.
Yes. And it went from Vince being infuriated about it, fining him, to that's what we need more of. I want penises in faces.
My goodness.
Large. Cylinder-like.
Okay.
Okay, time out. This is pretty monumental here. The idea that Bruce can pinpoint this promo from Shawn Michaels, and you remember the whole stuffed crotch deal, that is the beginning of the Attitude Era. I don't know that anybody else would have been able to pull that off. Can you imagine anyone else going out there and stuffing their trunks and jumping up and down and crotch chopping JR in the face and not only not getting fired, but it's sparking a new era for the company? Like that just, man, what a major paradigm shift and what an interesting relationship there is between Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon. Because I just assume, man, let Coco Beware go out there and pull that shit. That ain't happening. You know what I mean? But because of the relationship with Shawn Michaels, instead, Vince has to take pause and think about it. And we get a paradigm shift, a real paradigm shift. It's a very important moment in the history of something to wrestle that Bruce can pinpoint exactly when the Attitude Era began. I love talking about our friend Steven Singer. I'll tell you, the competition must really hate this guy. He just makes the experience of buying a diamond better and better, and he makes it fun. Steven is the very first to offer each and every customer the perfect price. That's right. Have you ever wondered if you're getting the best price? Are you uncomfortable negotiating? Head to Steven Singer Jewelers and you're guaranteed to get the perfect price. You'll never pay more than a guy sitting next to you. And here's a little insider tip. Most jewelers mark their merchandise way up just to mark it down to make you feel like you're getting a deal. The guy next to you may be paying less. Do you want the most important purchase of your life to be based on your negotiating skills? Not the case at Steven Singer. Because at Steven Singer Jewelers, you're guaranteed to get the perfect price all day, every day, 365 days a year. That's why we trust Steven Singer. He makes the experience of buying a diamond so easy. So check out Steven Singer Jewelers at the other corner of 8th and Walnut in Philly or online at IHateStevenSinger.com. Steven Singer Jewelers, one place, one price. Let's get back to the remix here for Bad Blood.
Hey, so hypothetically, does he give the money back?
Yeah, I have no idea.
I don't know why, but that tickles me that you would go from finding him to saying this is the shining example of what it should be.
This is what we need more of.
Right. Now, there's lots of theories at the time that Shawn was doing this because he was just an asshole, or that Shawn was really trying to attempt to be fired so he could go be with his buddies in WCW. Was there ever any sort of internal talk amongst you and JR or other people in the office that, do you think he just wants to be fired so he can go with them?
Yeah, we did. And it goes back to the old philosophy that I learned from Vince McMahon. You fire him when you want to fire him, not when they want to be fired. There
you go. That makes total sense. Well, it's been a while since we talked about Brackus here on the show, so let's talk a little Brackus. Shawn Michaels and Brackus, that's not a pairing you think you're going to hear very often, were sent to England and Germany for a promotional tour, and they wound up canceling the England portion because of the death of Princess Diana. How in the world does this pairing come together? Obviously, Shawn Michaels, one of the biggest stars in the company. I can get behind that. Who's sitting around the office and says, oh, let's send Brackus? This sounds like a rib.
He's German. He spoke the language. So he was actually a big name in the bodybuilding world and powerlifting world. And he was on several television shows over there prior to coming to the WWF. So he had name identity in Germany and he spoke the language.
We haven't ever talked about this, but on September 11th, Terry Funk holds his retirement show called WrestleFest in Amarillo. And on that card, we would see Mankind from the WWF wrestle Sabu from ECW. And we would also see Terry Funk challenge for the WWF World title against Bret Hart. How did this match come to be? We've talked a little bit about this on our Beyond the Mat episode where they showed clips of this, but I'm curious, what was Vince's reaction to Terry asking, or did you guys offer to send some talent for this show?
All three guys asked. Terry asked, Mick asked, and Brett asked. And Vince was all too happy to make it a reality for all of those guys. It was important to all three of them to do that show. And Vince had no problem with them doing it and anybody else that wanted to do it.
September 20th was the first ever UK pay-per-view, UK only pay-per-view, one night only. Quick rundown. Triple H beat Dude Love. Tiger Ali Singh beat Leif Cassidy. The Headbangers beat the Bariquas. Patriot beat Flash Funk. LOD beat the Godwins. Vader beat Owen Hart. Bret Hart retained the world title by beating The Undertaker by DQ. And then in your main event, Shawn Michaels beat the British Bulldog to win the European title. I had hoped to try to fit that in this year as a bonus episode. It didn't work out. Hopefully we can do it another time. But Bruce, there's lots of rumor and innuendo around this show because the original plan, allegedly, was for Bulldog to go over in the main event. But then the day of the show, according to the rumor and innuendo, Shawn talks Vince into letting him go over. And, of course, the plan is he's going to promise to drop it back to Bulldog. We know that never happened. One night only. Were you there? How'd this go down?
I was there, and we all talked Vince into changing the finish for more heat. And I think everybody saw it as a, happy, joy night. And we looked at it and go, what's going to be better? Is it Bulldog walking away with the championship, or is it to do the swerve and have Shawn win the championship and walk away with heat? That was the decision. It wasn't a conspiracy or anything. It just was, what is the best outcome for this pay-per-view for the future? And we felt that Shawn with that belt, with the heat of beating Bulldog in his hometown, was better.
As a reminder, that show goes down on September 20th. 2 days after this is when Vince tells Bret that he's unable to pay the new 20-year contract, and Bret is free to start negotiating with WCW. So this is like 6 weeks or so before Survivor Series, maybe a little longer. So at this point, Vince has to start, at least internally, trying to figure out a way to get the belt off of Bret, if he's going to at the same time tell him, I can't honor the 20-year contract. When did you become made aware that Vince was going to have this conversation with Bret?
I was probably made aware that weekend beforehand, but again, Vince didn't know what Bret was going to do. Still, he was going to give him that opportunity. Deep down, I think Vince really was kind of hoping that Bret would stay and work it out. So he, again, being the eternal optimist, was thinking, well, damn, Bret will stay and stick this damn thing out and fight with us. But I won't blame him if he goes and takes the money either, because it's a lot of money. I'm going to give him that opportunity out of respect for Bret. So Vince sometimes will just stick with that mindset. Now, I'm thinking about what you just said. Okay, we got to get the title off of him.
Right.
What if he doesn't? What if, he says we're gone? What's next? So we all knew that we were looking at Steve Austin, and we were looking at Steve Austin for the future. But do we get there now? Do we wait? We knew that WrestleMania was going to be the crowning of the era of Stone Cold. But we continually wanted to get there.
So let's talk about what's next, of course. September 22nd, where we're talking about this conversation happening, is Madison Square Garden. And they've got 14,615 fans there for these television tapings. They're going to draw big money, $258,000 at the gate, $97,000 in change and merchandise. And on this card, we see Ahmed beat Rocky Maivia in the Intercontinental title tournament, which is kind of interesting in hindsight that Ahmed beat The Rock. LOD would beat Farouk and Kama by DQ. Owen would beat Pillman by DQ, also in the Intercontinental tournament. And then after the match, Austin would attack Owen, and because of the restraining order, the cops come in and arrest Austin. This is when Vince McMahon comes down, asks the cops to wait, and gives the speech to Steve Austin about how everybody cares, including the World Wrestling Federation and the fans, and he just has to learn to work within the system. Austin does his, I appreciate the fact that you can kiss my ass, and he kicks and stunners Vince. Is this the worst stunner in the history of stunners, Bruce?
Well, definitely the worst stunner in the history of stunners up until that point.
Sure.
There have been a few other stinkers, but it's in the top two.
Now, the other one you're thinking about is Donald Trump.
Trump's wasn't that bad, was it?
No,
It was horrible. Yeah. It's probably in the top two. So the two billionaires probably took the two worst stunners.
Yeah, I think
Vince got much better as time went on, and he got used to taking them.
I'm curious, and I know we'll talk about this later, but that day, does Vince ask anybody how to take the bump? Does he practice? Does he watch tape? I mean, how do you guys get a billionaire ready to take a stunner?
He just went out and took it.
Obviously,
I mean, there wasn't. Probably should have been.
When you're in the back and you see the way he takes it, I assume guys are crowded around the monitor because it's very rare that something like this physically happened to Vince at this point. What's the reaction from the boys when they see the way he took this stunner?
Oh, that's pretty much it. You know, I had to open up my big mouth and made some stupid comments, but you know, he had never done it before, and that was his first attempt at working in the ring, so to speak. But I think he made it his mission going forward. And then everybody, you know, Rock tried to take the stunner different every single time he took a stunner. You know, Hunter would try and take it different every single time. Shane would try and figure out a billion different ways to take the damn thing. And I think everybody, if you're in that rotation of getting the stunner, then you figured out different ways to take it every night. Vince finally got around to it.
Well, you set the stage here when you said I had to open my dumb mouth or whatever you said and make some dumb comments. What'd you say? What got heat? What got back to Vince?
Oh no, I said it to Vince. I said, now I understand why your dad never wanted you to work in the ring. And boy, that was open mouth, insert foot.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, bad. You know, timing's everything. Timing was horrible.
Are you saying this to him as soon as he walks back through the curtain?
Pretty closely thereafter.
My goodness. How old were you?
But again, I was kidding. I was kidding. I was ribbing on the square and I was busting chops. And there's a time and a place to bust the chops of the owner of the company and your boss. That wasn't one of them. Lesson learned.
Oh, that's so great. We mentioned earlier, it's also the Raw where Cactus Jack would make his first WWF appearance, and he defeats Hunter Hearst Helmsley in a street fight that night. And as a reminder, this is where we start to see all three different gimmicks. We'd already met Mankind and we had met Dude Love, but now we're introduced to Cactus. What was the reaction backstage to seeing how the crowd reacted to Cactus Jack?
They were shocked that he was over as strong as he was over. And that's a testament to Mick Foley. The Cactus Jack character, he made it mean something. He made it larger than life. He made it that underlying don't go there in his psyche. So that's a testament to Mick Foley and his ability to pull off all the characters that he was able to pull off. And it's funny how Mick kind of turned the tide from Cactus Jack being that really scary character to Mankind being that scary character that you don't want to go back and tap into. And he did that over years.
Whose idea was it to have Cactus Jack come to the World Wrestling Federation?
I think in this particular instance, I think it was Hunter's, because it was like, well, wrestle, you know, we've done Mankind, we've done Dude Love. What if we saw Cactus? And everybody lit up like, oh shit. That would be cool. Vince didn't get it right away because he wasn't a fan of Cactus Jack, but he was a big fan of Mick Foley and figured Mick could pull it off, which he did.
Also in this same show, Brett would beat Goldust by submission. Brett wouldn't break the hold, and Michaels and Helmsley hit the ring and started attacking Brett with help from Rude and Chyna. Of course, Owen, Bulldog, and the return of Jim Neidhart would happen to help clear the ring out. And Meltzer wrote, funny to see Neidhart attack Rude, who by agreement isn't allowed to receive any blows due to his legal settlement with WCW. Rude didn't seem too happy about it, and Brett didn't sell for Michaels either. Finally, the Undertaker came out, and the ring ended up cleared except for Brett, Michaels, and Undertaker as the show went off the air. And of course, we know that was the dark match. Any memories about this Jim Neidhart, Rick Rude situation where Rude wasn't supposed to be touched and maybe Neidhart didn't get the memo?
Well, yeah, Rude was not supposed to be touched due to his Lloyd's of London deal. And coming in, Rude he could touch people, but he couldn't take any bumps. And I just don't think anybody ever smartened Neidhart up beforehand.
If we know that we're not going to be moving forward with Bret Hart, why is Jim Neidhart coming in here?
As a favor to Stu.
That's what I thought. The Observer would report that Yokozuna would be moving to Stamford, Connecticut, and he was expected to return because he was still under contract, even though he'd been off TV for quite some time at this point. Do you remember that was an original plan to have Yoko move to Stamford?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I think Yoko was going to move to Pennsylvania near Offa, but I don't remember him ever coming to Stamford.
Around the same time, and we've covered this on our Vader episode, October 6th is the Observer where they covered this All Japan Pro Wrestling and World Wrestling Federation / FMW show, which happens at the Kawasaki Baseball Stadium. I mention it because this is where we get the Ultimate Fight Rules cage match with Ken Shamrock and Vader. If you'd like to hear more about that, it's covered in great detail in our Vader episode. Bruce was involved there as well. And it's there if you'd like to hear more about it, but we're going to keep moving here. We start to see, some more DX hijinks on the September 29th Raw. And that was actually taped on the 23rd in Albany, New York. By comparison here in Albany, they only drew 4,100 fans to a Raw, and you would see Shawn and Helmsley playing the total smartass. And on that same show, we would see Farouk beat Ahmed by DQ in the Intercontinental Tournament, and this advances him to the finals where he's going to meet Owen, which is, of course, a match we're about to cover. But Meltzer reported here that the original plan was for Ahmed to face Owens in the finals, but he got hurt. This feels like something that just routinely happened with Ahmed. We covered this earlier this year where he was allegedly supposed to be in the main event of a pay-per-view for the world title against The Undertaker, and he got hurt. Well, now here he's supposed to be in the finals for the Intercontinental title with Owen, and he got hurt. Do you remember anything about this injury or what the original plans were?
You reach a point where they all kind of run together. So it just wasn't a guy's injury prone and continually comes up lame. After a while, they all just run together, and you start wanting to plan things for them and around them.
That same show is where we see McMahon confront Austin and give him three alternatives. He's either got to get a doctor's relief, sign a waiver absolving the WWF, or be fired. Of course, he picked door number 2, and they start promoting him in non-sanctioned matches, starting on October 18th in Fort Worth. But Meltzer reported that that's still not a guarantee. He still needs to be cleared. Was the thinking, even though we don't have the clearance from the doctor, he's feeling pretty good, so we're going to start advertising him in the local markets just to boost ticket sales?
Well, we knew that even if he couldn't wrestle a match, he could appear and he could do some physicality. But the prognosis was also looking really good.
Right.
And he was feeling a lot better, and we were getting every indication that he would be cleared and that he would be fine. He just needed to rest. This
is the show where we see Austin having some sort of interaction with Owen, and Owen for the very first time debuting his Owen 316 shirt. We talked about the shirt earlier, but we didn't talk about how Austin felt about the shirt. This can't be something that Austin was in favor of, right?
No, he was. It was a heat seeker, and it was furthering it was all about Steve, and it was all about his stuff. So when you think of Owen 316, I'm not going to get that. I'm going to get Austin 316, the real thing. I don't remember there being any heat there at all.
Okay, timeout. Bullshit. My bullshit meter is still going off all these years later. Bruce's insistence that Austin wasn't upset by the Owen 316 shirt. Of course he was. There's absolutely zero chance that the Steve Austin that we hear do interviews all the time, who talks about, being dropped on my damn head and damn near ended my career, blah, blah, blah. Now the guy's got a fucking t-shirt for it. Not cool. I'm sure that's the way Austin feels. No, I've never talked to him about it, but I just feel comfortable in assuming that that's the case. And it's kind of silly that Bruce is still defending it. Well, Bruce is kind of silly. Let's get back to it. All right. If you're a business owner, you don't need us to tell you that running a business is tough, but you might be making it harder on yourself than really necessary. Don't let QuickBooks and spreadsheets slow you down anymore. It's time to upgrade to NetSuite. Stop paying for multiple systems that don't give you the information you need when you need it. Ditch the spreadsheets and all the software you've outgrown. Now is the time to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSuite gives you visibility and control over your financials, your HR, your inventory, your e-commerce, and more. In fact, it's everything you need all in one place instantaneously. Whether you're doing $1 million or hundreds of millions in revenue, you can save both time and money with NetSuite. So join over 24,000 companies using NetSuite right now. Let NetSuite show you how they'll benefit your business with a free product tour at netsuite.com/wrestle. Schedule your free product tour right now at netsuite.com/wrestle. That's netsuite.com/wrestle.
So we've kind of set the stage for how it got to this pay-per-view, but I want to give you a comparison for where they are with WCW at the time. September 1st, Nitro was unopposed and did a 4.73. September 8th, Nitro does a 4.3, Raw does a 2.2. The next week, Nitro does a 3.9, Raw does a 2.6. September 22nd, Nitro is 3.7, Raw is 2.4. But September 29th, Nitro does a 4 and Raw does a 2.7. So it's going back and forth here, but firmly Nitro is in control. How big are the ratings in September and October of 1997? Are you guys waiting around the fax machine with bated breath every Tuesday? What's the routine for these ratings coming in?
The routine was usually USA would call Vince's assistant, and Vince's assistant would call us. That was normally how we got them. And we just, it was a big deal. We waited. Not, when you're getting your ass kicked, you're not as excited to get that news, to find out how badly you got your ass kicked that week. Sure. It's kind of like, oh shit, they came in. What were they? And if you were up, then we stopped right about, I want to say in November, maybe December that year, where we stopped looking at ratings. We stopped, it was almost like the dirt sheets. Don't read them. Don't look at them. Don't worry about them. And we started worrying about the business that was in front of us and our house shows and our pay-per-views and moving forward, and figured that if we built that up, that everything else would follow.
Well, here we are. We're at the pay-per-view, and the show opens with the Bad Blood graphic and the music playing. Of course, a lot of you probably recognize, I think this is Steve Blackman's ring entrance music later on. And then on the free-for-all, they announce, of course, that Brian Pillman has passed away after wrestling the night before in St. Paul. We've covered his death and the way Vince and the company handled this in long form on our Brian Pillman episode. So if you're a really big fan of Brian Pillman, I can't recommend that episode for you enough. It's probably one of our more detailed, certainly one of our first very detailed stories. Vince would mention this again during the Nation of Domination's entrance. Anything else that maybe we haven't touched on that we should regarding Brian Pillman's passing and how you guys got that news that day that he had passed away?
I think for the full, comprehensive story, go back to the Pillman episode because we did cover it in detail. It was a sad day. It was tough to take. And I'm the one that unfortunately Cornette actually got the news and put me on the phone, and it was a terrible day and hard to take, but not a good way to start your day.
All right. Well, let's keep going here in the show. And I should mention there is an interesting story about how they get the news and how Vince tells everyone to respond. That you should probably go out of your way to listen to that Brian Pillman episode. Kama Mustafa and D'Lo Brown are going to be tagging with Rocky Maivia to take on the Legion of Doom here in a 3-on-2 handicap match to get us started. Ken Shamrock was in St. Louis and planning on wrestling, but he wasn't able to take any bumps due to his lung injury. And obviously with everything that's happening this day, they probably just make the decision not to risk it. Right, Bruce?
Yeah. Kenny was not in any shape. Kenny was still coughing up blood, and we just didn't want to further that injury and have him miss more time. So the decision was made, keep him off. He had just made that trip to Japan. So it probably shouldn't have done that, but we did. And the decision was made. Nope, let's keep Kenny off.
They go about 12 minutes and 20 seconds before the Legion of Doom get the Rock up for the Doomsday device. That they manage to get him out of that position, the Nation of Domination do. And then all of a sudden, Hawk gets pinned with the Rock bottom. So a fun little interesting opener, because it's something that a lot of us, myself included, don't really think about the Rock ever really having an opportunity to work much with the Legion of Doom, but here he is on pay-per-view with them. What'd you think of this match watching it back?
Again, we talked about this recently. I was shocked at how Animal moved. Good God. Joe looked really good during this time. And the match itself, I thought they had a good match.
Yeah.
For what it was in the opening match, it was exciting. It was good. It told a story. And you go back and watch it and you see, okay, man, The Rock is the guy. Yes, he is, without a doubt. But it made me appreciate even more. The other one that stood out big to me was Godfather. I thought he looked great in this match. And going back, I was shuddering watching this on the network because I'm thinking, oh God, this is going to be terrible. This is going to be a match that I can fast forward through and do some, or I can do something else while I'm watching it. And I sat there and just watched the damn thing going, good match.
I should mention here that Meltzer did not give any star ratings for this pay-per-view. He wrote, I really can't give a fair assessment of the show. It appeared that none of the matches were any good except the main event, which was a strong candidate for match of the year. I'd give the show a thumbs in the middle, but it's hard to really give you any feelings on the show. And we should frame that statement so you understand. Brian Pillman was pretty friendly with Dave Meltzer, so he would have been watching this show just minutes after learning that he had passed away. So he's probably in a different state of mind, which explains why we're not going to be covering star ratings here from the Observer. But if you had to give this first match a star rating, Bruce, and don't use your 6-star line, how many stars would you have given this match?
2.5.
Okay. I didn't expect a real answer.
Well, you asked me a real question.
Yeah. I just, wow. Kudos.
Now, if it was in the Tokyo.
Oh, I knew it. I knew it was coming. Vince referred to Rocky Maivia as Rocky Johnson during the match. Did you see that when you watched it back?
Especially in those days when The Rock would do the shuffle before he would throw a punch. He looked just like Rocky. So, yeah, you could make that slip from time to time.
This is not too long after Rocky has turned heel and joined the Nation. I can't wait for us to talk about that. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Bruce.
No, you bring that up, and I just, it's funny to me, and it's not funny, haha. It's actually laugh out loud, enjoyable to listen to the commentary 20 years after the fact.
Right.
And Vince with this, oh, what a maneuver. And then Jim Ross right behind him. That's an enziguri. Jim would come right on the heels of Vince's. Oh my, that would be a fisherman suplex. And they would just continually, God, it's so different from the way the commentary is now. And Vince was so frigging over the top, and I can see him in my head talking out of the side of his mouth. And then from there, and JR and King going back and forth. Got any more one-liners there, Henny? And the commentary in and of itself is extremely enjoyable on this pay-per-view as well.
Yeah, it's fun to go back and revisit Vince as a commentator. And it's kind of an interesting note here that this is the last pay-per-view that Vince would ever commentate. Right, Bruce?
Yes. And the other fun thing is if I had the time, I would have gone back and counted how many. 1, 2, 3. He's got him. Oh no. And look, from our vantage point, I mean, he did that so many times, that false finish in this pay-per-view. But this was Vince's last pay-per-view to be the play-by-play guy.
After this match, we go backstage and we see Sonny and Doc Hendricks plugging the Superstars line. And usually they blur this out, but for whatever reason on the network here, they didn't. I found that interesting. How do you think Doc Hendricks did in this role? Because when I look back at it, he does a better job at it than I imagined. I mean, I really wanted to make fun of this, but he did a pretty good job.
Well, come on, you can still go with the FMDJ guy. Hey, it's handsome Doc Hendricks here, everybody, here with beautiful Sonny, and we're at the hotline, and you too should call the hotline right now if you'd like to find out what the losers and the winners are saying right after their matches. And we're going right now, Sonny. Who's up next? I just always find that funny. But I thought Doc did a great job. Michael Hayes in that role worked his ass off in the stuff at the pay-per-views, but more importantly, the event center things that he did. He made them all different. He busted his ass getting it out there and selling tickets. And I thought that was a great role for him personally.
Vince then says the next match was supposed to be Brian Pillman and Dude Love. He instead offered his condolences to the Pillman family. And next up, we get a special attraction, Max Mini and Nova beating Tarantula and Mosaic when Max pinned Tarantula in 6 minutes and 43 seconds. Bruce, this feels like a last-minute replacement match for Brian Pillman. Is that accurate?
That is true.
So where do you get 4 Hispanic minis at the very last minute in St. Louis?
Mexican minis are us.
Okay.
Doesn't everybody have 4 or 5 minis hanging around backstage?
I've actually got 4 in the closet right now.
But my point exactly. I knew that you would understand. So you kind of look around and go, mini uno, mini dos, mini tres, mini cuatro, tag match.
Nova here is formerly Masquerita Sagrada. He's probably the more name recognizable and one of the more talented minis from this time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Max Mini was the star. Max Mini was the one that we wanted to make the star, that Vince fell in love with. He's such a cute little bastard. All these guys, these were the top minis from Mexico at the time, and the guy Tarantula was the one that did the Mankind gimmick when we had the minis dress up in the characters of the WWF. There were this was probably the best of the whole group. It was a good group of little minis.
Next up, and we mentioned this earlier, there's a commercial in the pay-per-view for the Austin 316 shirt. If you had to put a real ballpark on the number of shirts you think that thing sold, like a real guess, We're in the millions, right? How many millions?
Wow.
Just freestyle.
5 million,
Really?
10 million. I don't know. A lot.
That's amazing.
It was millions plural.
Now, you guys were selling this shirt for what, $20 at the time? So, wow. Really process how much freaking money that is. That's unbelievable.
Bro, it was hot. I mean, you put Austin 316 on you put Austin anything on anything. It was all selling.
That 5 just seems hard to believe, but let's just pretend it is. $100 million in top line gross from one t-shirt design.
Not bad, huh?
Oh my gosh. Let me get a piece of that. Next up, we see Sonny come down to be the guest ring announcer. I don't really understand the point of this, but the Godwins come out first, and they've recently turned heel. And I guess when you turn heel, you just wear overalls with no shirts. It's sort of like the old school, hey, if you're going to be a bad guy, grow a beard. Right, Bruce?
Well, yeah. Isn't that what hillbillies do when they turn bad in Alabama? They take their shirt off.
Okay.
And you bring on your uncle.
Yeah, let's talk about Uncle Cletus. I recognize him, but I'm sure a lot of people may not. Who was Uncle Cletus? Where'd he come from?
T.L. Hopper.
Isn't that amazing?
Uncle Cletus was the dirty white boy, Tony Anthony. And Tony's from Tennessee. The first time that I met Tony Anthony, he was one half of the Grapplers tag team in Mid-South Wrestling and came in, or actually South, it doesn't matter, but he was one half of the Grappler tag team. And then he and Lynn Denton, who was the original Grappler, they took the masks off and they became the Dirty White Boys. Came out to the song, "I'm just a dirty white boy. He's a dirty white boy." Yeah, I don't know. I'm doing a rap version of it. But they were the Dirty White Boys. And then after Lynn retired, Tony went on to be just the dirty white boy with the dirty white girl as his manager, his wife at the time. So Cletus was Tony Anthony, formerly known as Dirty White Boy, formerly one half of the Grappler tag team, and formerly T.L. Hopper.
Hey, Something to Wrestle With fans. You love this show, and so do I. In fact, hundreds of thousands of wrestling fans each week listen to Something to Wrestle With Bruce Pritchard. And you can advertise to those fans. And it's probably more affordable than you